This is the Inner Chief Podcast, episode 317.
There's a lot in the world that's changing, and we've talked about this from a communications perspective. It's chaotic. It's how do you know what to communicate? But that's where we think brands really have a role and an opportunity moving forward, which is, being one of the trends is truth-telling versus storytelling. For a long time, we talked about brands and people as storytellers. We think now the opportunity is to be truth-tellers.
G'day, this is the Inner Chief Podcast, episode 317. And our guest today is the CEO of Havas Red Australia, Shane Russell, on how to avoid PR disasters and to build a communications campaign that will build your company brand and customer engagement. And of course, the ever-changing media landscape.
I am your host, Greg Layton, founder of Chiefmaker and the Council of Chiefs. And I believe there is a great chief in all of us. And that through listening to the stories, strategies and techniques of great CEOs, each of you can find and leave your own legacy through your work. The Inner Chief Podcast is where you will learn how to think and make moves like a CEO. For over a decade, I've helped CEOs and senior executives around the world boldly lead change, inspire their people, and leave a legacy. So every 2 weeks, I'll bring a deep diving interview with one of these CEOs or another one of a mid to large organisation so you can find your own path to greatness as an executive.
In this episode, I chat to Shane Russell. Shane is the Chief Executive Officer of Havas Red Australia, which merges best-in-class PR, social media, influencer and experiential storytelling with content at the heart. Over the past 2 decades, Shane has worked with some of the biggest, most entrepreneurial minds around the world in Australia and New York. He has a track record and personal brand of leading some of the most impactful campaigns and building high-performance teams around the world. He now leads Havas Red in Australia, which represents world-class brands across health, wellness, corporate technology, automotive, travel, and more. You would absolutely be familiar with some of their campaigns. Today, you're going to hear Shane talk all about his early years in the PR world and how he strived to be a person of value with some of the biggest hitters in the game, taking the plunge by selling everything, including the business he built up, and moving to New York. How to avoid stuffing up a PR campaign, a bit like Bud Light. However, how do you do that and still stand for the causes that are important to you? Also, we'll talk about the rapid pace of change in the media world. We will also cover some of the latest trends in the media world and how you can keep adapting to ensure you have the best possible communications and engagement with your customer. Chief, one of the core skills of all great chiefs is the ability to interview and recruit the very best performers to your team. Now, many chiefs say to me that they get up to 25 or even 40% of their recruitment decisions wrong. Now, many of you who listen to this show will know that over the last 6 years, we have asked dozens of CEOs what is their number one interview question when recruiting for senior roles. What we have done is turn that into an invaluable resource. It is the 30 most powerful interview questions used by CEOs to hire high performers. These are the questions that reveal the true nature of the person in front of you. They are the ones that give or create that truth-telling moment that will help you decide whether to hire or not. Chief, if you want this resource, just go to chiefmaker.com/interview and just pop in your details and download the detailed PDF. Okay, Chiefs, let's hear from our remarkable guest, Shane Russell.
G'day, Chiefs. Welcome to the Inner Chief Podcast. And we are delighted today to have Shane Russell, CEO of Havas Red in Australia. Shane, welcome to the Inner Chief Podcast.
Thank you so much, Greg. Excited to be here.
Shane, we have a great tradition on this show where we just love to know where our chiefs come from. And one of the best things about you is you come from where I come from, far north Queensland. Right. So, can you tell us a bit of a story that sums up your childhood and early life?
Yeah, no, it is always great to speak to somebody else from the great region of North Queensland. So, look, I had a wonderful childhood in Townsville, and I sort of bucket the first 20 years of my life into one category, or I guess two themes, and they are hard work and teamwork, and sort of the themes and why that's the reason it is I grew up in a family half Greek, and if you know the Greeks, they've got small businesses, and my parents had small businesses my entire childhood, much like my mum grew up in small business, whether it was news agencies, whether it was delis, hair salons, you name it. I got to see and live every day what hard work was from my parents, whether it was all day at the shops, all night. But sort of through that, the main reason I did that was to provide for the family and also provide for the community around them. So being exposed to that from literally, a very young age right through for me was invaluable now today. The second piece, which runs through that theme, is the sort of teamwork piece, and that came through basketball. For us, we're a big basketball family. My dad ran Townsville basketball for 15 years. We lived and breathed basketball outside of small business. And what was drilled into me from an early age there was you are, bigger than the team. And if you aren't ready to do whatever it takes for the team to succeed, then you're off the team. And I think the cool thing in the 90s, which might be the last time it's happened, is coaches were allowed to kick your ass. Parents wanted coaches to do that. And so I can think of 1,000 times where we got our asses kicked by coaches. And it taught us this valuable lesson that, you better play your role regardless of whatever it is for the betterment of the team. And so when I think about family life and basketball life for the first 20 years of my life, those themes were just constant all the way through. And it's kept me grounded, and it keeps me focused on now what is most important. So that does summarize 20 years in Townsville. Lots more happened in that time, but I think those are the two things I look back on and say had the most impact on my life.
Yeah, wow. You and I have such a similar background, basketball with my father too, right? What kind of business did your mother own?
So she had lots of hair salons. She had one
Sorry,
actually
sorry,
burned down to the ground. Then we opened up
yeah.
a fruit and deli. Before that, it was news agencies. She grew up in milk bars. So again, maybe it's a Greek thing, maybe it's not, but it was just always a small business.
Yeah, wow. So what was your first ever job then?
So officially, I mean, I'm guessing they ran me off the books for a long time as a kid, which I can talk about now, 40 years later. But a first official job was actually McDonald's. So they happened to be our major sponsor of my basketball team. So I got the hookup. I think I was 14 years and 9 months and stayed there for 3 years through high school. And it was pretty awesome. Met lots of friends there. My now wife also worked there, but we weren't together back then. But yeah, it's quite a popular job in Townsville.
Wow, the Macca's hookup. I haven't heard of many of those. That's outstanding. So what was your first ever car?
I'm guessing everyone says it was their favorite car. For me, it was because it represented freedom in a whole new chapter of life. But it was a 1983 Ford Telstar. We bought it off an old couple. It was in phenomenal state, red velvet interior, beautiful. I was very sad the day that went, but it literally just fell apart. So I had to get rid of it.
They tend to do that. Hey, look, let's talk about your real career now. From a really early stage, you're exposed to this incredibly demanding but very entrepreneurial environment. Can you tell us maybe a bit of a story about how that started and how that shaped you?
Yeah. So, I took a bit of a different path into the PR world than perhaps some of my, colleagues and associates here. I got through university studying journalism, and doing work experience in journalism in the late 90s taught me I didn't want to be a journalist. I could see the change coming. I could see what was happening with digital, et cetera. And I just happened to meet a PR instructor that came through uni, and I chased her and said, could I do some work experience for you? So a few months of that, I graduated uni, and I was introduced then to, imagine Townsville. There's not big agencies in Townsville. There's not too many opportunities for people aspiring to be big in PR. I happened to meet this husband and wife who ran what was probably the most successful marketing and sales operation for residential resort hotel developments throughout North Queensland. And they were looking for a young PR person to join. So I start the first day I walk in the room and I'm just terrified because I'm a one-man PR show, despite having, great people in research and marketing and sales. But also we represented, big time developers who, if you know that world, it's quite cutthroat. It's like, you help me sell, or I can find someone else that can help me sell. So my role in that team was obviously to help broadcast the stuff that we were selling and the cool stuff we were doing as an agency. But I was very fortunate to work for two entrepreneurs in the business who had just been doing it for a long time. And I was learning more about sales and business and growth versus the ins and outs of PR. That stuff came naturally as I went along. But I think having those foundations from day one was just monumental. I still think about it now. It still shapes the way I entered a room for meetings. There was many times where, I'm 21 years old. I know nothing about the world or business or PR. And I'm in a room with a developer of $1 billion project trying to give advice on what we should be doing in PR. And if I wasn't prepared for that, they would literally just kick me out of the room. So it sort of makes you work backwards to think, what's the value I can provide in this team? I don't have to be the star of the show. I certainly won't be the star of the show. It's what role can I play? What value can I bring? And how can I help the business and the product move forward? So, working for entrepreneurs in the business and working with them as part of that team to help them sell really set me up in a different pathway, I think.
Shane, I think the people who would be listening to this, every single one of them is saying to themselves, how do I add value? You're in these pretty intense environments at a very young age, asking yourself, if I don't prove my value, I'm going to be booted out of the room. How did you tactically, practically add value? Can you give an example of that?
Yeah. So look, first and foremost, it was all about research. I had to know, I was dealing with some big egos for starters. So that was pretty clear is, you learn how to play to certain people's personalities and the ways they operate. And I don't mean the people I worked for, I mean the clients I was working with. So first and foremost, it was really knowing the audience and who I was in the room with, and then understanding that I had to prep and be, precise and accurate and give really good counsel and advice when I was asked. So I spent a lot of time before meetings really writing notes, thinking what I could say and what I could do before a meeting to put something in front of somebody so I walk into the room kind of warm. So that was kind of number one, was just always being prepared. And that's something I still do today. I mean, I've got in front of me a bunch of notes that you can't see that I've since memorized that are in my head, because the last thing I want is to come into this room and not give something valuable. So it sounds pretty basic, but that's been the number one principle I've had ever since. Because ultimately for me, I would take it as the greatest insult to be kicked out of a room. I didn't want to be kicked off the team for not being the hardest worker or the most prepared.
When you're preparing for a meeting, and you spoke about knowing the egos, personalities, stakeholders, what are the questions you ask yourself?
Yeah, look, first of all, how can I add value? I'm dealing with very smart people. They've been doing this for a long time. And I might add, before my first job, most people were 30 years older than me. So they're coming into the room with 30 years experience versus when I'm starting out 6 months, or now, 20 plus years. I'm still working with people that have had very vast experiences. So I'm trying to figure out, what, like, again, I talked about ego as one part of it. How can I sort of play to that in a way that gets me forward with what I want to achieve? But I want to understand, what are they trying to achieve from a business level? And it's the question we have to ask all the time at Havas Red as well, is what are we trying to solve for the client? And if we can come into the room and talk about how we're going to solve those problems or create those opportunities, that's what the CEO or the business owner wants to hear. They want to talk about solutions and progress and how we can build on what we've done. So, maybe I wasn't doing it at such a high level 20 plus years ago, but that's the aim of the game as far as how I'm prepping is, when they leave this meeting, they're going to have a clear impression that I help them move it forward, and they're going to have a great impression of me.
You mentioned maybe 5 minutes ago how in your first few examples or foray into the world of PR, actually the PR stuff came later. It was understanding how that impacted sales and PR as a vehicle, right? But understanding how that really affects their bottom line is such an important point.
Yeah, look, it was always, in everything we did, I'd write something up that was great for the media, but my team would come in and say, well, what does this do from a call to action? What are we actually trying to get people to do as a result of this? And, you know, that's probably one of the biggest debates we can have around what is the role of PR and earned media versus the rest of the marketing funnel. But ultimately, we are here for sales, right? I mean, every business we work for is trying to sell something, whether it's even non-profits, it's trying to sell a service or a. So, you know, if you can understand, again, what is the number one reason I'm in this meeting or the number one reason I'm working for this client, it is to help them, you know, with their message, with their sales, with whatever it might be. It's as simple as working backwards from that. So that was what I really focused on, again, was, you know, if I'm working with a developer who only cares about selling apartments and marina berths and different things, what can I do to help them sell that through what I do in the PR and comms world?
Look, at one point, you decided to go out and launch your own consultancy, and you built that up over a period of time. Why did you go out on your own in the end?
Well, the simple reason is 2008 happened. So I was, so it got pretty tough, and I'd since moved on from the first job to a smaller agency based in the Gold Coast, did a stint down the Gold Coast, had gone back to Townsville to try to expand them back up north, and right at the wrong time, right? So again, going back to a small market, but I'd sort of built up some reputation over the years up there and had, you know, made some connections. So I had a mortgage, I had nowhere else to go, and decided, you know what, I'll just do it. And, you know, I guess the benefit of hindsight, it's a bit easier to do that when you don't have kids and other responsibilities, but I still had a mortgage and, you know, I was late 20s without a job. So overnight started the consultancy, got 2 clients in the first week. And I think the biggest thing that I took out of that was, it was probably the very first time I realized that you can just make things happen that you didn't think you could do before. And, you know, I think I'd already made it through some of the tougher lessons of learning the business side, or at least a bit of that stuff through my previous jobs. But this was the first real leap of faith where it's like, I'm the buck stops here now. I'm now in charge versus being a worker. And having to find clients in that environment and having to hustle and set up a business and work on the business and find partners that I trusted. You know, it seemed monumental, but I think in hindsight, it was done over the course of a few months, and it was operational and profitable pretty quickly. And, you know, sort of realize what you're capable of when you just take the plunge.
So why, in the end, did you decide to go to New York? Why did you shut it down? Well, we'll talk about New York in a minute, but
yeah. So 3 years in, life was really good. So I had a consultancy for 3 years, working on some great projects across real estate and sports and government. Also having lots of fun. You know, every day I'd have a lunch or a coffee with somebody and network, and so life was great. It was one summer day, we were sitting in the pool, and my wife, or now wife, said to me, "I'd like to move to New York." And the next day we bought one-way tickets for 6 months ahead. We sold my house. We started to sell her house. We sold off all our belongings. We packed a suitcase, and we had no plan. So we went from, you know, almost 10 years of working and building up this reputation and skills, and had the consultancy. Wife was a nurse, and we just threw it all to the wind. And, you know, for us, it was kind of a big move. And, you know, in being honest, I was kind of reluctant to the change because I worked really hard to build what I did. And for 6 months, I was kind of excited, but kind of, you know, upset about the move. In hindsight now, the best move we ever made in our life was, you know, I've taken plunges with opening the consultancy. This was the biggest plunge, was going there without a job, without a visa, nothing, and just turning up with a suitcase, which sort of, if I think in chapters, was the very beginning of the next chapter of our life, which was, you know, monumental.
Now, Chief, do you want to take your game to a new level, or that of your people? Our mini MBA in leading high performance teams now has the highest NPS of any mini MBA style program in Australia at 91. Why? Because when you do the program, you get immediate and tangible performance improvement. You get dedicated time working on the business as opposed to away from it. We have a practical, real-world approach, and we teach frameworks that you implement in your business as we go, and then you share and learn with your peers and with me as your coach. So the cost benefit is immediate, right? The weekly coaching sessions are live, and you get a chance to ask questions direct to me and of your peers. And the time management is completely achievable because you're only spending a couple of hours a week on this at max, and those 2 hours are actually working on the business. So if you want to add something that really changes your game, that helps you become a real master of transformation and change, and to inspire your people and love your job, check out chiefmakeup.com/mini MBA.
Let's talk about that, because now you're off to the biggest, toughest market in the world, New York, USA. Think or swim, I suppose. I think you've described it to me previously. Now you're working on much bigger brands, much bigger PR campaigns, more global work. I think a lot of us would love to know, like, what was the most holy shit, what the hell am I doing in this meeting room moment you had?
Yeah, look, I was thinking about this quite a lot because I've spent the last 2.5 years back in Australia now, and if I can give a real answer, it's the entire 9.5 years I was there, and I'll give you the reason why. There was many times we were there because we literally had to start from zero all over again. We had no connections work-wise. We had a few friends there. We had zero credit history, which if you know the American system, you're getting nowhere without a credit history. But we literally had to start from zero. And, in that 10 years, we got married there. We had our first daughter there. Our second one was on the way there. My career completely took off from a very humble beginning in the States, where I took the job that I had to take and worked really hard to work all the way up. But honestly, it's this 9-year run of just building exceptional contacts in my network and, getting to a point where I helped to build an agency into a really big agency that's got great people and still doing really well now. But the whole 9 years, but there was so many times where also you talk about pinch me moments. I got to meet people like Shaquille O'Neal, or, I'm a basketball fan, so I'm standing next to a 7'3" guy that I've always looked up to. But there's been meetings I've walked into with celebrities and, billionaires. And so there's been lots of those things. But to me, it's this entire package. And we're really proud of it because we built a life that, again, go back 20 years living in Townsville. There's no pathway from Townsville to New York. As great as Townsville is, there's no clear pathway. And we didn't grow up aspiring to live there. But what we realized, and me professionally going through the consultancy piece and then to this, is you can make literally anything happen. There is nothing stopping you from taking the biggest plunge where you're totally uncomfortable, out of your depth in many ways. But you can make it happen because you look around and realize lots of people are making it happen. And New York for us was that representation. I spent my entire 30s there, and I think in many ways grew up in New York. The next phase of life, because again, we had to fend for ourselves in every single way and just make it happen.
I think you make a really important point here around making it happen. Often you get into big organizations, it can be government, big corporate, and you can feel like you don't have that agency. You don't have the ability, maybe the energy, because you're stuffed from running home. And you're sitting there at work going, how do I make it happen?
I've got a good answer to that, by the way.
Okay, go, yeah.
Let's go back to one of our themes again, entrepreneurs. So I happened to land at this PR agency in New York that is run by the most entrepreneurial person I probably will ever meet. And I know what makes them tick. And, what makes them tick is growing sales and making more money. And that was the name of the game from the minute I got there. Even though we're working in PR and doing great work, I knew if I could help that person grow the business through real money, real revenue through, bringing in more clients, growing clients, that I would have an unlimited pathway at this agency. And that's what I focused on. I forced their hand in many ways by bringing in lots of clients to say, listen, there's a bigger value I can bring here. And again, I had great support there and people that really helped me along the way. But that's what I focused on, was how can I grow revenue at this agency? And ultimately it would come back and really help me. So that was it. But we also then worked for the best and brightest in the world, trying to make it in New York as well. So, when you're in New York, it's the media hub, it's the financial hub, it's the culture hub. You get amazing opportunities to work with brands who are also trying to come to New York and make it, or are established and trying to go bigger and better. And that's, again, this opportunities to work for entrepreneurs and with entrepreneurs has been the biggest accelerator of my career, I think, in understanding there's more to it than just the craft of PR. It's how can you ultimately help them grow the business.
One, trying to translate that into people who maybe aren't working for an entrepreneurial type, but every organisation I've ever worked with or consulted to and coached with, there is always a group of maybe entrepreneurs that are actually trying to make things happen. And if you're feeling a bit stuck in your role and a bit like the plateau of performance and results or getting a bit stale, then you've almost got to hook yourself onto those people in the business that are hustling and trying to. Otherwise, you're just going to have a life just slowly drained out of you at work.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, there's, and I think it's also important, now that I'm CEO of this agency, I look at it and go, look, if we had all people that were hustling and trying to grow sales and business all the time, it'd be a tough place to run. So I think it's fair to say there's always going to be room in places like the agency world for really good workers who maybe are just wanting to do good work and go home. Not everyone has to be that hustler or entrepreneur, but I personally love working with people who don't see a ceiling or don't see a mold that they can't break. And I'm attracted to that type of person in the workplace. So I tend to thrive off people that come to me with ideas and opportunities as well. And I don't have too many rules in that regard. So I think it's as much on the top to also teach the younger groups or to teach others to say, listen, you don't have to follow the rules all the time or follow the mold. There is an opportunity for us here to do something very different. We don't have to play by the same rules. As long as we achieve the end result we're looking for, I really don't mind how we get there. And I think if we see that going upwards and downwards the chain, then we'll ultimately find more people that can, have the opportunity to grow a business or to achieve something very different.
Hey, Shane, look, you're a self-assured kind of guy. Do you ever question
All the time.
what do you do when you do that? Because everyone always says, yeah, I question my ability. But what's amazing about characters like you is just how quickly you can recover from that questioning to a place of feeling reasonably confident. What do you do to get that? Outside of prep, you're still prep.
I mean, lots of failure. Everyone says this as well. Like there's been many times I've failed where I've said or done the wrong thing. And like when I talked about getting kicked out of a room or out of a training, it's happened a lot, by the way. Like I had trouble biting my tongue around coaches as a kid. But it's sort of, I've since learned that I want to avoid that outcome. And I always think about things as far as outcomes, whether it's a positive outcome or a negative. I know there's 1,000 ways to get there. But, so for me, I don't know the answers to so many things. And what I try to do is find people that do. So, even here at Red, I've surrounded myself with people who I think are so much better than me in so many areas. And I see my role now as trying to be the facilitator that connects those people or put them in the best position to succeed. So with that, I get the opportunity to ask dumb questions. I get the opportunity to sit in meetings and just listen. There's lots of people here that are brilliant, including clients, where I think I can take a back seat and listen and learn. And even in the past 9 months that I've been in this role, it's been another new education completely. There's been so many processes and ways of working that I've never done before that I have to learn very quickly. So I just go to people and ask questions. And I think that's the environment I want to be in. Is we shouldn't sit here for 2 months not knowing how to do something. Just ask somebody and we'll figure it out. And so, yeah, that's sort of my approach has been obviously learn what I can and avoid the outcome of being humiliated or embarrassed. But ultimately, I'm okay learning and also passing those learnings on to other people.
Well, let's talk a bit about the role you're in now with Havas Red. Maybe could you give us a 30-second outline of what exactly you guys do? Then I can drill into some questions on it.
Yeah, so the super top line is we're one of the preeminent, PR, social media, content, and experiential agencies in Australia. We've, got a pretty long heritage here in the country. We're in Sydney, Melbourne, and Brisbane, 80 people, but primarily brands come to us, and I think I mentioned this already. Our job is to solve the most important challenge they have from a communications, marketing, sales perspective. We want to help them engage the audiences that they care about, be it clients and customers, be it investors, be it their community, be it their workforce. Our job is to make sure we help them communicate the things that they want to communicate as a larger piece of their business strategy. So, there's obviously traditional PR and things that we do really well, but I think we're seeing this world now where social and content and PR and all these different channels are all merging into one, where our consumers aren't just reading The Australian, they're looking at TikTok and Instagram and The Australian and Facebook. So, it's our job to make sure our brands are communicating to their audiences through all those channels in the right way.
Okay, there's thousands of agencies. What is the difference that makes the difference between Havas Red, which has got this long and successful history, and those that fail? The difference that makes the difference.
Yeah, look, it's a good question. We get asked this all the time in a new business pitch. What makes you different, right? And my answer has always been the same in agency world. The people are the biggest difference between each agency. For the most part, we do a lot of things that are the same. There's lots of great agencies out there. One really amazing thing, which we probably don't talk about enough, is within my 80 people, we represent 6 different decades. So from 20s through to 70s. And we have a lot of people, 50s, 60s, and 70s in our organization, which for me is an enormous asset because you've got people that have the ability to look past the trivial moments of today and last year and everything that's going on in the world and give us a lot of perspective and a know-how that sort of helps younger generations get through. But then we have the younger guys who are very tech savvy and understand all the latest trends and how things work in the media. So for us, people is a huge part of what makes us different. But the second piece is Havas Red's part of a global network. So we're one of 18 Reds around the world, all over. And then we're part of Havas, which is one of the 6 largest media and creative agencies on the planet. So we've got the scale and resources on top of the people in Australia to really, take brands that are globally coming in or globally going out of Australia. And we've got examples now we're doing, we're the sort of global hub here in Australia, working with 5 markets elsewhere. So I would say scale and services and people for us is literally it.
It is a really complex world to communicate.
Yep.
And we're just seeing one company after another score own goals with the best of intentions, a throwaway line, something taken out of context, a cause that's gone too far or just not communicated well. Can you give a bit of, I suppose it's got 2 parts to this question. What are a couple of principles that a senior executive should follow when they're thinking about communicating the brand and meaning and to the market? And maybe 1 or 2 examples of a brand that's really just bottled it.
Well, unfortunately, there's no shortage of examples lately, and it's all being supercharged by, again, the fact that we're always on now, and we're all, there's so many channels to capture news. But look, first and foremost, we've got to stop for a minute and look at, again, if we're a brand that's trying to communicate our purpose to the world. First of all, it's got to be very authentic. You can't be out there and preaching something that you don't practice from the start. So there's got to be truth to it, but you've also got to understand your audience. And this will be key when I explain one of the examples I'm going to give you is you've got to understand, who you're serving in general. And it could be investors, it could be, again, your internal audience, it could be clients and customers, whatever it looks like, it's different for every business. And you also have to understand that not everyone has to like you. So don't try to be everything to everyone. So if you put those together from a starting point, and then you think about what are the things we care about communicating to the world, if we can do that in a way that's true to our business and what we stand for, and we do it the right way, sensitively, and we've tested it and talked to people, and you're willing to stay behind it and get behind it, then great, go with it. That makes sense. And, we've seen, and one of the sort of most high profile examples I'll jump into, because I think it was the most consequential from a business and financial perspective, was Bud Light. And we saw this, close to a year ago. Bud Light for 20 years was the number 1 selling beer in America. And if you think about Bud Light and the brand in any way, you think about middle America, you think about football and nachos and probably mostly middle-aged white men drinking beer and that's it. But, they wanted to sort of improve sales with a younger audience. They wanted to be a brand that was much more inclusive and open and just more fun and light. So they engaged a bunch of influencers about a year ago, and one of them, right or wrong, they engaged a bunch of people. One of them was a transgender influencer on TikTok who's quite famous for documenting her life story and change and built this great following. They engaged her on a campaign, and it was picked up by some semi-right-wing commentators, and it blew up out of proportion to the point where you would have seen stories of Kid Rock shooting his gun at cans of Bud Light and everyone boycotting the brand. And it dropped immediately in sales and is now no longer even close to the top beer brand in the US. And it caused billions of dollars of sales losses and on and on and on it's gone. I think the intentions they had were great. Trying to show inclusivity and engaging an audience, a younger audience through social. It ticked most of the boxes, but what I would say there is perhaps from an audience perspective, it needed more, investigation before it went live. And I don't think right or wrong. Again, the intentions were great. It's just more that, you saw the consequences of something going into the wild where it becomes out of your control. And I think a lot of businesses have seen that and learned from it, despite many still making mistakes. But I think that's it, is it makes you evaluate now is, there's a risk and reward even to trying to do the right thing.
One of the things that you're talking about here is the complex mix of stakeholders, from clients, company owners, boards, community groups, governments, a range of actual customer groups and profiles. This is really, really complex.
Yeah.
So for organisations that won't ever work with Havas Red for whatever reason or another, what are some of the questions they really should be asking themselves to not score an own goal?
Yeah, and look, I think the majority of the own goals we've seen here in Australia and overseas haven't been as much tied to product or sales or the core of their business, right? It's been about representing something or talking to a new audience or standing for something. And I think that's where we've seen most of the mistakes happen, is they've kind of, branched out from whatever the core service or product is they provide. But I think if you're a business that's looking at this landscape and going, is it just safer for me to be quiet? I think what I would do is, if you aren't doing much of a communications or PR sort of push externally, I would start with the core business. I mean, ultimately, we're customers because we love the product or the service. And we're loyal over time because you continue to delight me through customer service and innovations and all the great things, right? And then over time, I started to love the brand because it stands for something that I believe in, and it makes me feel good in the times that I use the product. So you think about the evolution of a customer. So I would say, if you're a business that doesn't engage in much externally, start there. Start with talking about and engaging the people that love your business or product or brand. Communicate to them through all the channels that are available, not just the traditional PR release that people think is what PR is, but talk to them in wherever they touch a brand, online, in-store, socials, etc., and build a base out of that. And then over time, if you're ready to take a stand on social issues or other causes that are, that mean a lot to you and the brand, really evaluate the audience and really evaluate, the good and the bad of what could come from taking a stance. Understanding that not everyone's going to agree with you, and are you okay with that?
You touched on a good little line there where you said PR is not just a press release.
Yeah.
Can you expand for those that maybe aren't so familiar with what really PR is? Like, what's the full definition?
Yeah, look, I mean, ultimately, it's relations with the public, right? And again, we talked about this complex nature of stakeholders, and that could mean, so your public can mean a lot of different people, a lot of different things. 30 years ago, and when I first started, actually, we were faxing out press releases to the small handful of daily newspapers, and that was our way of communicating to the external world. We weren't blasting out emails, we weren't using social, we weren't really holding events. Fast forward to today, and I talked about this, there's an explosion in channels of which you can communicate now. And one piece we kind of touched on with the example on Bud Light is things can get out of your control because there's now, millions of content creators that aren't even associated with a media platform, but they can take your news and broadcast it out to their audience. So there's just so many ways to communicate today. Obviously, with us, we talk to the journalists and the media all day long to try to frame great stories for our clients and the press. That is such a small channel now of the overall mix. Because again, as consumers, I just saw the stat recently, Australians are now spending the average of 33 days a year on social media. That time has to take away from something, and mostly it's taken away from reading newspapers and watching TV news, and probably taken away from our jobs and our families too. But you've got to think about, how do people consume news today? And, an old tactic was you send out a press release. That is, for the most part, dead and buried unless you're a public company and you have to announce something. It's now about direct relations with your audiences through channels like social, and direct through events, and direct through electronic marketing and email, and, again, through the media. So it's just, when I talk about knowing your audience, it's also knowing how your audience touches the brand.
Yeah, it's a relationship.
It is.
So, Havas Red has just published the Red Sky predictions for communicators in 2024. It's got 8 predictions for the year ahead about what we all need to be aware of and conscious of. Let's not give away all 8. We'll get people to download the report. But what did you find most interesting, maybe even unexpected in that report?
Yeah, so this is our annual predictions piece. We talk to our, heads of agencies around the world. We look at data and insights and trends, and we pulled together 8 trends this year that, in my opinion, have some pretty good through lines that connect quite a few of them. And I think we've touched on a few of those already today, which is around brands representing truth, brands representing authenticity, and brands building trust. Because let's zoom out for a second. We're entering a year where there's 40 plus elections around the world. We've got 2 active conflicts that we, at least we know about in the mainstream. We've got this sort of knocking on the door of a recession for the last 18 months. We've got cost of living. I'm probably missing a few other things in there. I apologize, but we're coming out of COVID. There's a lot in the world that's changing. And we've talked about this from a communications perspective. It's chaotic. It's how do you know what to communicate? But that's where we think brands really have a role and an opportunity moving forward, which is, being one of the trends is truth telling versus storytelling. For a long time, we talked about brands and people as storytellers. We think now the opportunity is to be truth tellers. And what that comes down to is, again, brands stay with you because they love your product or your service, but you can really build that loyalty because your brand is being an educator or someone that's helping you learn or grow in a certain area. By telling the truth and not sort of, trying to put lipstick on everything, right? So I think that's one of the huge opportunities for brands this year is to really be a truth teller and to engage people on that level. Another one we see, which we talk about a lot, which is, we've gone through this whole podcast so far without mentioning the word AI, which might be a record for all the podcasts I listen to. But obviously, we think about the impact that AI can have on every part of our life as well as business. We see the real opportunity going forward is we've got to have people that know how to harness the power of that because we think it can supercharge creativity, output in many ways of our business and also our clients' businesses. So we're looking at this sort of, this trend around the marriage between humans and AI as actually a really, potentially positive outcome for business and marketers and basically anyone that sort of, works in any area of a company. So, there's many more trends here, but I think that the through lines are the most important piece is people just want to hear the truth and just want to be talked to as humans by brands.
Look, we'll put the link to that report in the show notes. I've been through it. It's not like a 50-page thing. It's very easy to read. It's important stuff. And I think anyone who's in a senior role should check it out.
Yeah, we also touched on what we talked about, which is that brand reputation risk, which I think is probably the one that most CEOs will want to read through.
Righto, Chiefs. More from Shane in a minute. Now, recently, I chatted with the Managing Director of SAP Concur in ANZ, Fabian Calais. We spoke about being agile in a large corporate, leading as an introvert, and the career skills he obtained from martial arts. Here's what Fabian had to say about prioritisation.
And I remember speaking to one of the founders of the business when I first joined, and I thought I was busy. And I said to him, exactly that. I said, look, I'm busy. I've got emails and calls and all these sort of things. So I can't imagine how you do it. He said, well, you just don't prioritise, that's all. You focus on the wrong thing. And his shoulders. I'm like, wow, thanks. And it took time.
You can listen to that remarkable story with Fabian Calais by going to chiefmaker.com/315. And while you're there, remember to subscribe to the podcast on all our channels. Just go to chiefmaker.com/listen now. Righto, Chief, let's get back to Shane Russell of Havas Red.
Hey, let's shift more to your own personal performance. I've just got 1 or 2 questions around your own excellence. And in particular, one of your most important values and principles is family first. Everybody says family first.
Yeah.
Shane, what's the most difficult thing about that is how on earth do you do it daily in a tactical manner? How do you go about tactically making family first happen?
Yeah, look, you've got to live it. I mean, to your point, everyone says it, right? And I experienced it as a kid. My parents always had us around, even if we're at work with them, it was always family first. But my first address to our entire agency, it was my number one point. And I said, I'm here to obviously be the best possible CEO, and I have an obligation to make sure I do a good job for the 80 people that work here and for our clients that look to us to deliver for them, and even for my Havas group employer up and down the chain. But my number one priority, and I said this, will always be my family. I've got 2 young daughters, and that is the center of my world. But tactically, how we do it, it's not easy. One, I got rid of, for the most part, social media. At the end of the year, I obviously still go in every day and follow journalists and different trends, but I've cut that time down because that was the time being taken away from important things, work and family wise. 2 is I have a phenomenal wife and support system who, puts me and the family forward as first as well. So that's obviously a huge asset when it comes to managing time. But more importantly, I manage my time around the 2 parts of the day during the workday that I know I'm going to get the best out of my kids, which is the mornings and the nights. So I try every night to be home for bath time, book time, bedtime, which is not always easy because, it's sort of racing at the end of the day. And if I want to go to the gym, it's 5 a.m. So I can be home at 6 a.m. for my kids to wake up, have breakfast. So I try to optimize the times of the day when I know I can have the best time with them. And all day long I'm getting photos and different things from my wife, so I'm always checking in with the kids. And weekends I try to switch off completely. I don't really have a social life anymore. It's kids all weekend, and then it becomes kids parties like my daughter's party yesterday. But so it's not easy. You have to plan for it like everything else. And I think I try to maximize the time that I have for work and then for family. And outside of that, I'm not sure there is an easier way.
So many hours in a day.
Yeah. But I'm open. If anyone has tips for me, please.
We're all trying to solve it, Shane.
Yeah.
And I think one little tip from everyone, that's all you really need. So let's finish with a set of sort of rapid fire kind of questions, Shane. Okay, if you could form the ultimate executive team, any well-known leader from any time in history, who would your first 3 picks be, and what role would you put them in?
Yeah, great question. And obviously you aside, since I'm sure someone's already said you, but...
You know what? No one has ever said that.
Really? All right, welcome to the team.
Don't pick me, I'd be a disaster.
I've gone with 3 people who were able to look way downfield before anyone else, who continued to innovate once they got, everyone else tried to jump into the market, and basically created entire markets on their own. So my CMO is Sonny Beccario. If you don't know Sonny, he was the man who picked Michael Jordan for Nike back in the 80s. When the board was saying, here's a pot of money, go and endorse all of these rookies, he said, nope, we're going with one. And Michael Jordan was not Michael Jordan yet. And you fast forward 30, 40 years, it's arguably one of the greatest brands on the planet because of that pick. And he's gone on to do that with a number of elite athletes for brands like Adidas and Nike.
Is he the guy in the movie Air?
Yeah, he would be. And look, he's done some things which may not be above board business-wise as well. So I want to caveat that I'm not here to endorse some of the behavior. But if you look at the outcomes of him being able to pick talent ahead of time, he is unbelievable. So CMO / that kind of role. My chief product officer and head of innovation is Johnny Ive. So the famous Apple designer. I think what he did was, he's influenced the entire market of products, software and hardware design with simplicity, and making really complex things very simple for consumers like me to use. So he's a guy again that looked downfield, and now you see everyone following suit with the way everything from their their typeface to their design of products, etc. And then my CEO / COO is Reed Hastings. So Reed is the co-founder of Netflix. And his story, if you haven't listened, is incredible because they were laughed out of the room by Blockbuster when they were in there trying to sell to them back in the 90s, back when they were just shipping DVDs around the country. And only a matter of years later managed to completely wipe them off the face of the planet with their streaming service eventually. And even now, to this day, still continues to lead the market, despite it being one of the most over-invested industries by, Disney's and HBO's and you name all the different streamers, continues to be the cultural leader in the category. So Yeah, that's my squad, and I'm pretty happy with it.
That is a pretty awesome squad. I like it.
All right, good.
What has been the most valuable learning program of your career outside of work experience?
Travel. So the New York period of our life kicked off a long period of travel, just because of access, obviously. But whenever we travel, for me, it makes me just so happy. I'm looking downfield, planning, learning, and it's forces me to read a lot more about culturally different things and geographically different things, and gives me perspective I didn't have before. So I would say travel is number one.
Look, a lot of leaders sit there and say that, look, they don't have time to work on the business, just million emails, meetings, I don't know. What would be your no bullshit counsel to them?
Well, I think you use the right word. Is no bullshit. The buck stops with us, right? We don't have time to do it all. There are things we can prioritize and things we can, either pass off or leave behind. And I think ultimately, when we're being asked by our bosses or boards, did we get the job done that we hoped to get done? If we haven't, then that's on us. So I would say the answer is cut the bullshit and get straight to the point of the stuff that's going to make the most difference.
Hey, what is the best advice a mentor or coach has ever given you?
If I can give two quick ones, both of them basketball related. The first one from a coach who absolutely used to kill me would say, close enough is not good enough. And I remember the very first time he said it because it was screamed at me. We'd done something wrong. We got 10 laps of sprints. Last one back had to do something like 50 push-ups. And of course, the big guy was the last one back. We were about 20 meters short and started to drift into the line. And he stopped everyone and said, close enough is not good enough. You didn't sprint all the way. 10 more, let's go. And that stuck with me a lot over the years. I always think about that because it's so relevant in work as well. And the second one was more of a tip from a friend. I was very upset one time losing a big championship game. And he said, take this silver medal and hang it up where you're going to see it every single day, and always look at it and understand that next year it's going to be gold. And I think it's, again, super relevant from sport to business here as well.
What is the number one interview question you use when employing people to your team?
I care about people more than probably, the capabilities. So for me, I'm asking them, what kind of person are you going to be like for me to work with 6, 12 months from now? Not just what are you going to bring to my team and my organization, but what's it like working with you once you're set up and firing?
What kind of answer do people give to that?
I mean, you hear some usual stuff, but you can kind of drill down from there because there is that 6, 12-month grace period of getting to learn and up and running. But I don't know, you get lots of different answers. Some people tell you that they're really hard to work with. And you know what? Then it's like, great, if you're really good at your job, I'll figure out a way to work with you. But you do get some pretty honest answers out of that.
Yeah, that's interesting. I would love to hear some different answers to that one. What's your number one book recommendation?
So no surprises from me. It's Shoe Dog by Phil Knight, which was the movie you just spoke about. So Phil Knight, the founder of Nike, or co-founder, going back to entrepreneurs and hustlers and, being on the thread of failure 50 times, and then obviously striking gold in a guy called Michael Jordan. But generally it's just a phenomenal, case study in perseverance and entrepreneurship.
Can you nominate another CEO you hold with great respect for the podcast?
I can, and I haven't even told the person I'm doing this, but one of the entrepreneurs I worked with in the US is a guy called Joel Holland. And he had a really good exit on his first business, which was in the stock media space, and then went into his passion business, which is like an Airbnb for caravanning around the country, and blew this thing up. So he is a multi-time entrepreneur, all-round good guy, and just a really smart operator. So he'll love me saying that about him.
Oh, nice. We'll see if we can lure him onto the show. Yeah. Okay, if you could lead any company in the world other than your own, or other than this one, what would it be?
Yeah, again, it comes back to me for my passions. So I've got two options there. One is Nike, which I think actually has some pretty big headwinds for the years ahead in competitive businesses coming up. And the next would be the NBA. Diehard basketball fan, but they've just taken to the global stage like no other sport. And I'm really keen to see how they consolidate that global growth of the sport.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, Shane, look, this has been wonderful. What is a final message of wisdom and hope for the next generation of chiefs?
Yeah, look, I love this question because I have so many great young people here, and what we say to them is, you are no one's going to care about your growth as much as you. You're responsible ultimately for how you do in your profession. We will support you all the way, but I want you to take the initiative to learn outside of even your skill set, outside of this industry, and just be a continual learner and try to always get better.
Career ownership precedes career victory. I like it. Hey, Shane, it has just been absolutely awesome to have you on the show. And I learned quite a bit about PR and your journey. Thanks again for all that you do, mate.
No, it was wonderful. Thanks so much.
Righto, Chief. That sums up for this week and that remarkable story with Shane Russell. He is a true chief who has gone above and beyond to serve some of the biggest brands and campaigns around the world. And beyond all that, he is a very genuine and authentic guy. And you can just feel that he cares about his people and his work. Righto, Chief. All the links and resources for this episode can be found at chiefmaker.com/317.
Now, Chief, if you're yet to rate the episode and subscribe, I hope you'll do so soon. It helps others see the magnificent value that the chiefs and gurus on the show bring to their life and career. So make sure you hit subscribe on your podcast app now, give it a 5-star rating if you think it's worthy, and leave a short review about your favourite episode.
Righto, Chief. As always, remember to stay happy.